Fast linear channels were a big topic of conversation at the Connected TV World Summit in London last week. And in fact, it was dominating the conversation of many of the panels, but there is a problem with the growth of this industry because it is virtually impossible for consumers to find these channels if they don't already know about them. And this threatens to derail the growth of this industry if we don't fix it. Now, I actually sat down with Simon Miller, who is Managing Director of Gracenote's International Metadata Product Sales, to discuss this issue. And he discusses the Fast Linear Discovery Challenge, and he also explains a new solution that the company has, which is built for aggregators and for providers, TV platform providers that is, to help them fix the problem for their customers so that they can actually find the channels in the platform. And by the way, during this interview, I used the terms fast linear channels and virtual linear channels pretty much interchangeably. They both mean the same thing. They're these streaming linear channels that you'll find in services like Pluto TV and in Samsung TV Plus. This is Colin Dixon with nScreen Media, and I'm speaking with Simon Miller, who is Managing Director of Gracenote International, and we are at the Connected TV Summit in London. Simon, welcome.
Thank you very much. Good to see you.
And you had some really interesting news just recently that I wanted to catch up with you on about fast linear, and you're solving a really difficult problem for the industry. One of the issues is that when you do a search for any fast linear channel on any of the typical platforms like a Roku or Samsung TV Plus, when you do a search for content, the fast linear channels don't show up. The content in those channels don't show up, does it? Right, so you're doing two things to fix that problem. So why don't you tell us what you're doing and how you're solving that problem?
Sure, well, I'll do my best. Good to see you. So the product that we've made an announcement about is the Gracenote streaming channels data. And effectively, what we've observed in the industry, as you say, is that fast channels are a growing phenomenon, and more people want to squeeze the best value they can out of their vast libraries of content, and they're producing fast channels, and they're popping up all over the place. They're sometimes time limited to either seasons or events that are happening, and so they're often difficult to track. And what we want to do is make sure that the universal search and the super aggregation strategies that are central to what our most senior clients use us for includes those fast channels, exactly as you described. So, we have historically solved the search and discovery problem in the linear world. We need to do that in the streaming world, and fast is part of that equation. And so linking all of the fast channels to the already existing linear and stream data is essentially what that service will do.
Right, and so you're doing this first. The first thing you're doing is you're including or adding an ID for the channels, right? And explain what the ID is and why it's so important.
So the ID is integral to any sort of search and discovery, and cross-linking and recommendation. So we are both a metadata company, and that involves making sure that we have high-quality images, accurate and clear synopses, good descriptions of cast and crew, as well as all of the schedule data. But all of that is utterly meaningless if it's not underpinned by a solid ID structure. And the Gracenote ID is the barcode for the entertainment industry. It's the way in which our most senior clients link elements of their vast entertainment platforms, which are becoming more and more sophisticated all the time, together so that we're making sensible, intelligent recommendations on behalf of the viewer at home. And the ID is the underpinning, the barcode, as I say, right, to that process.
So that ID allows you to associate some sort of schedule, whatever the schedule is for that particular channel, and a whole bunch of other information. But there's one other important, critical ingredient in that, and that's the content that's actually scheduled in there. If you don't have great metadata, as my listeners will know, you don't get found. So that's the other piece there, and that's where you're really helping the content provider, not the service aggregator, right? Because you're making it discoverable.
Absolutely. So we ingest metadata, or we ingest information, source data from content owners all around the world, and have been doing so for many, many years. We then normalize that metadata so that it fits into the standards which become a useful entity for our distribution clients. So the quality of that metadata is imperative. The good news is that for many fast channels, we've already got the program IDs. Not always, but typically we may well have that program ID. But as you create the channel, we also need to add the channel ID onto that as part of the way the ID infrastructure works, and ultimately the recommendations from that ID infrastructure display the recommendations for our clients and solve the search problem that we're talking about.
Right. This is very timely, because I'm expecting, and certainly one of the things that's been a hot discussion item at the CTV Summit here in London was fast channels and the explosive growth. I'm expecting a lot more people to step into this aggregation role of these channels. So I think without this infrastructure, it's going to be very difficult for the content to be found. This makes inclusion of the channels much easier. It really has a very beneficial impact to the whole ecosystem, right, for fast linear.
It does, and Gracenote's role has always been to provide a service that sits between the distribution platforms that are hosting these fast channels, as well as the content owners that are creating these fast channels and looking to make important revenue out of their back catalogs and historical, their libraries of programming. So I think that Gracenote is continuing in that role of being both a provider to both sides of that distribution and content camp.
Right, and so this is a new service, but it's already available and up and running, right?
That's right. We launched this just yesterday in terms of the naming of the Gracenote streaming channels database. But it's a service that we have been we've been providing that service already, and we've got a number of fast channels that we are supporting for content owners around the world, and it's very, very strong in the United States, but we're seeing that grow very fast outside of the United States now as well.
Yeah, one of the interesting trends that I've seen is actually pay TV operators are starting to include fast channels in their regular channel listings. This is very important for the operators. They really wouldn't be able to do it. I mean, assuming that they're using your data for their guides anyway, for their traditional linear television, they wouldn't be able to do the addition of the fast linear channels into their guides without this, right?
That's right. We know from conversations that we have with our clients is that even the most powerful content operators are asked and instructed in many cases to make sure that they're using a Gracenote ID so that super aggregator, that universal search functionality works for the distribution platforms. They will answer much more intelligently questions about the way in which the user experience is evolving and people wanting more and more of these fast channels and sort of being sort of fed traditional linear channels in a fast format. That's all about the user experience. Our job is to service that functionality and that search once they've made the decision to invest in that sort of a user interface.
This couldn't have come at a better time. I'm expecting there to be an actually explosion of people that are aggregating these channels. I'm already seeing some of the cloud guides beginning to include fast channels as well. They're not just acting as guides to SVOD. Now they're actually providing virtual linear channels in their services. I expect also SVOD services to start to create their own virtual linear channels, distribute them both through fast platforms and through other aggregators, and turn their own apps into linear integrators, linear aggregators as well. So this explosion activity really can't happen unless we can link the channels, we can ID the channels, identify the schedules, and link the data to it, right? So it really underpins all the growth that I'm expecting to see in the market.
Absolutely. I mean, I can see you sort of relishing in the explosion of all of this interesting content.
Yeah.
And that's wonderful. And certainly being here for the last couple of days, you've seen people talking exactly in the way you are. But if you're sitting at home, that explosion only exacerbates the paradox of choice.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
you've got all this stuff out there, and you may or may not be aware of it, but can you find it? There's no point in that content being there unless it's discoverable. So, you know, I can see your excitement, and you could see the excitement in the hall earlier today and yesterday. But unless you can find that content, then there's, you know, that's an important step to be making.
Yeah, always the biggest challenge. Simon, thank you so much for spending time with us to tell us about this service. And I look forward to looping back with you in a couple of months when it's more widely used, and I hope you've got some more exciting announcements for us.
I'm sure we will. Look forward to it.
Very good. Thank you, Simon.
Pleasure.
This has been Colin Dixon with nScreenNoise.